It was late October, a quiet Tuesday night, with only 5 patients in our ward, and the halls were unusually still. I remember the hum of the vending machine louder than normal, and the flicker of that one hallway light that always acted up near room 214. That's where Mr. Hamill was staying. 84 years old, a retired schoolteacher with failing kidneys and a calm smile. He didn't talk much, but always gave a polite nod whenever I checked on him. He wasn't in pain, not really, just drifting, like he knew the end was near and had already made peace with it. Part of my job that night was to check on him every 30 minutes, just routine care, making sure he was comfortable, taking vitals, noting changes. At 2 a.m. sharp, I walked into his room like I had a dozen times before. No alarms, no sounds, just the steady beep of the monitors and the soft shuffle of my shoes on the tile. But this time, I knew something was wrong the moment I opened the door. The air was heavy, like the room had been holding its breath. He was lying there, eyes open, staring at the ceiling. Still, too still. I stepped closer, reached out to check his pulse, his wrist already cold. There was no movement in his chest, no flicker in his gaze, no sound from his throat. I stood there for a moment longer than I should have, just staring, because he looked so peaceful, like he had left the world while dreaming of something soft and quiet. I noted the time, 2 a.m., and did what I was trained to do, called the attending, informed the family, filled out the preliminary death documentation. Everything felt normal, routine, sad but professional. I even remember telling another nurse. He went in his sleep, eyes open but calm, like he didn't even know it happened. The shift dragged on after that. There's something about death that slows time, makes every hallway feel longer, every monitor beep louder. But we made it through. Around 7:30 a.m., the sun just starting to rise behind the parking lot, I sat down in the nurse's station to finish my documentation. It was quiet, just me, my coffee, and the flicker of the computer screen. I pulled up Mr. Hamill's chart, double-checking my notes, making sure everything lined up. Vitals, medications, room temperature, everything was logged perfectly, until I saw it. A medication entry, 2:15 a.m., furosemide, his diuretic, administered orally, signed off by me, my name, my signature, my handwriting, but I never gave him anything at 2:15 a.m. He was already gone. I had already documented his time of death as 2 o'clock. I stared at the screen for a long time, thinking maybe it was a system glitch. Maybe someone accidentally signed under my name. It happens. Rarely, but it happens. So I pulled the paper log from the locked cabinet, checked the medication book. Same thing. 2:15 a.m. Furosemide, initialed by me. Same loopy. I always write when I'm tired. I flipped to the nurse cam footage. Every room has one facing the hallway, just to confirm comings and goings. And sure enough, there I was, walking into room 214 at 2:14 a.m., carrying a paper cup. I paused the video. That couldn't be right. I was in that room at 2 o'clock, and I know I never went back in. I would remember. I would. Wouldn't I? I watched the next few seconds play out in stunned silence. There I was, standing beside Mr. Hamill's bed, talking, smiling, handing him the cup. He lifts his head, drinks, nods. He's alive. Alive. That's not possible. I know he was cold when I touched his wrist. I know there was no breath, no pulse, and I had documented the death already. So what the hell did I see? I don't remember any of that. Not a second. And yet the footage is there. The logs are signed. The medication is accounted for. Even the cup was found on the bedside tray by the morning staff. I didn't know what to say, so I didn't say anything. I deleted the footage, tore out the paper log sheet, rewrote the documents, moved the time of death to 2:30 a.m. The earliest I could reasonably justify. No one questioned it. Not the doctor, not the family, not the day shift nurse. But I can't stop thinking about it. About how sure I was that he was dead. About how cold he felt. About those eyes. They weren't looking at the ceiling. They were looking through it. Like they already saw what was on the other side. And yet, the video shows him blinking, drinking, thanking me. What does that mean? Did I see wrong? Did I misread the signs? Or did something else come back in? Sometimes, in the quiet moments between call lights and rounds, I wonder if that room was ever really empty at 2 a.m. Or if I just interrupted something. Maybe I gave him the medicine. Maybe something else used me to give it. I'll never know for sure, but I do know this. 2 weeks later, another nurse was assigned to room 214. She swears she saw Mr. Hamill sitting upright in bed around 3 a.m. She walked in and he was gone. Flat line. Dead. Again. She didn't tell anyone, but she looked pale for days. When I asked her what she thought she saw, she just whispered. It felt like he was waiting for something to finish, and maybe he was. I had settled in behind the desk, cup of stale coffee beside me, charting slowly, waiting for the clock to drag itself toward morning. That part of the building doesn't get much foot traffic during night shift, especially the far end of the west wing. Most of those rooms are empty, lights off, doors closed, silence wrapped in silence. Room 207 was one of those, unassigned, and used, forgotten in the paperwork, but still part of my route. Around 11:30 p.m., the call light for 207 lit up. Just a soft red blink. One quiet chime, then stillness again. Startled me, but not in a dramatic way. More like a cold finger tapping your shoulder when you didn't know someone was behind you. I stared at the board, took a slow sip of my coffee, and waited for the feeling to pass. Then I stood up and walked the hallway. The door to 207 looked the same as always. White paint, metal handle, just enough scuff marks to make it look like time lived there. The light above it was glowing, faint but clear. I opened the door. The room was dark, but the hallway light spilled in behind me, enough to see everything. The bed was made, monitors off, no signs of anyone inside, but the call light on the wall was lit, bright red, like someone had just pressed it. I walked to it, clicked it off, paused for a second. There was no reason to stay, but I didn't leave right away. Something in the air felt strange, like it had been disturbed, like the room had just finished breathing in. It was subtle, but real. Eventually I backed out and returned to the station. Told myself it was a glitch. We've seen stranger things with this old equipment. About an hour and a half later, just as I was finishing an incident report from another wing, the light went off again. Same room, same red light, same quiet ding. I felt my stomach twist a little. I didn't want to go, but of course I did. That's what we do. We check even when we're scared. The hallway was even quieter than before, like everything was leaning in to listen. I reached the door and stood there for a moment, just listening, just breathing. Then I opened it. Still empty, but not untouched. The bed looked used, like someone had been sitting on the edge, barely pressing into the fabric, but just enough to leave a dent. The air smelled faintly metallic. Not blood, not medicine, just cold. The call light glowed again. I pressed it off, watched the light fade, stood there longer than I should have, waiting for the silence to end. Nothing did. I turned to leave, but paused in the doorway. I didn't hear anything, but I felt it. A pressure behind me, not physical, just present, as if someone had been standing over my shoulder, only a breath away. That feeling didn't leave me when I walked back. It stayed, settled into my spine, followed me to my desk, followed me into my next rounds, followed me into the bathroom where I had to stare into the mirror just to remind myself I was real. Then, around 3:05 a.m., the light went off again. Only this time, it wasn't a ding. It was a buzz. Sharp, erratic, urgent. It pulsed down the hallway like a scream underwater. I stood up fast, too fast, nearly knocked my chair over, and started walking, not because I wanted to, but because I had to. That's what we're trained for. We respond. As I got closer, I realized something had changed. The door was already open. All the way. That door had been closed every other time. But now it was wide, like someone had invited me in. The lights inside were flickering. Not broken, just flickering, in a pattern that felt wrong, like they were trying to blink out a warning. I stepped in, slowly, and stopped just a few feet inside. The bed was turned slightly, not in any obvious way, but angled differently, as if someone had shifted it without trying to make it obvious. The call light on the wall was blinking nonstop, faster than it should, the sound more like a rattle than a tone. I walked over, put my hand on it, tried to push it in, but it didn't budge. It was like the button didn't exist, like it was part of the wall, or like something inside was pressing back. I checked the outlet, the cord. Nothing unusual. I tried turning off the breaker from the panel outside. No change. The buzzing continued. The red light kept flashing. Then suddenly, everything stopped. No fade out. No slow return to silence. Just nothing. The lights, the sound, the movement, gone. Like a curtain being dropped in the middle of a play. I stood there for what felt like forever, listening to the absence, waiting for something to fill it. Eventually, I walked back to the station, but I didn't sit down. I just stood there, heart racing, mouth dry. I couldn't focus for the rest of the shift. The sound of that buzzing stayed in my ears, long after it stopped, even when morning came, and the light outside turned the halls gold. I didn't feel relief, because now I knew. Room 207 wasn't just an unused room. It wasn't empty. It had been waiting, and now it knew someone was paying attention. I never reported the incident formally. There wasn't anything to say. No proof. No patient involved. Just a faulty light, maybe. A sensitive switch. A tired nurse hearing things in the dark. That's what I tell myself anyway. But now, every time I pass that room, even when it's sealed shut, I look at the panel. I wait for that red light, and some part of me knows it's gonna come back on someday. Not because of wiring, not because of error, but because whatever is in that room remembers me. I've sat with a lot of people in their final hours. That's what happens when you work in hospice care. You become the last voice some people hear, the last touch they feel, the last person to look them in the eyes and tell them it's okay to let go. It never gets easier, but you do get used to it. You learn how to hold a hand without shaking, how to breathe slow so they can match you, how to sit in silence without letting the weight of it crush you. But this night, this one still lives with me, not because of how it ended, but because of what happened after. It was winter, the kind of cold that settles in your bones. Our heaters were working, but the air still felt sharp somehow. Most of the rooms were full that week, and I was covering a longer shift than usual. She was in one of the older rooms, the ones near the back with the windows that creaked. The kind of room that always felt too dark, even with the lights on. She was quiet all day, not asleep, just fading, eyes half open, lips dry, the kind of look I've seen too many times to count. But that night, as I was doing rounds, she reached out for my hand. Her fingers were cold, thin, and shaking a little, and then she said it. "Please, don't leave me tonight." I looked down at her, and something about the way she said it stopped me cold. There wasn't panic in her voice, but there was fear, the kind of fear that settles deep in your chest, quiet but desperate. I sat beside her, pulled the chair closer, held her hand tighter, and told her I'd stay, and I meant it. I stayed there longer than I should have, past my scheduled rounds, just listening to her breathing, talking softly about small things, where she used to live, what her favorite flowers were, what music she missed. She didn't say much in return, just squeezed my hand now and then. Sometimes her eyes would flutter open, just long enough to meet mine. I don't know how long I was there, maybe an hour, maybe more. Time works differently in those rooms, like it stretches or folds in on itself. Eventually I got called away. Another patient needed help. And as much as I didn't want to go, I had to. So I told her I'd be right back. Just a few minutes. I gave her hand one more squeeze, stood up, and walked out the door. The hallway felt colder than it had earlier, and quieter, but I told myself it was just the time. Almost 3 a.m. now, the hour when everything feels a little off. It took longer than I expected with the other patient. 20 minutes maybe a little more. When I came back, the first thing I noticed was how still the room felt. Still in a way that you can't really describe. Like even the air was waiting. I stepped in, and I knew immediately. She was gone. Her hand was resting on the blanket where I'd left it. Her face turned slightly toward the window, eyes closed, peaceful, but empty. That part never gets easier. Even when you expect it, even when you know it's close, the moment when someone is no longer there, it always feels a little too quiet, like the world holds its breath for just a second longer than it should. I stood there for a moment, just watching her, just trying to feel something. Then I went to log the time, called the doctor, started the process, the way we always do. It was routine, until it wasn't. I had just stepped out to grab her file, when I heard the soft chime, the call bell. I turned, confused, and there it was, the red light glowing just above the door. I froze. She was gone. I had already checked, already made the call, but the call light was on, as if someone inside had pressed it. I stepped back into the room, half expecting to see someone standing there, but it was empty, completely still. The light on the wall was lit, soft red glow. Same button she had pressed earlier in the night when she asked me not to leave. I walked to it slowly, pressed it off, my hand trembling more than I care to admit. I stood there for a long time, listening, feeling. I even checked the wires, thinking maybe it was faulty, maybe it was just bad timing. But it wasn't. There was no malfunction, no short, no pressure on the cord. Someone had pressed it. I looked back at the bed, and that's when I noticed it. Her pillow had an indent, not just from earlier, but fresh, like someone had just laid their head down and gotten back up again. The room felt wrong, not dangerous, not hostile, just wrong, like something hadn't finished yet, like a promise had been broken. I didn't sleep after my shift, couldn't really think clearly either. I just kept hearing her voice in my head. Please don't leave me tonight. It wasn't a request. It was a warning. I don't know if she was afraid of dying, or afraid of being alone when it happened. But either way, I didn't keep my promise. I left, and when I came back, it was too late. But I think she waited for me, long enough to know I came back, long enough to press that button, just once, just so I would know she hadn't gone entirely alone. Or maybe she didn't go at all, not right away. Maybe that call bell wasn't a goodbye, but a question. Are you here now? Can I leave? Can I rest? I still don't have an answer, but I never forgot that night, and I never ignored a call light again. Not even the false ones, not even the ones in empty rooms, because you never really know who might be waiting just for a hand to hold, just to not be alone.